Hello, how's everybody doing? Welcome back to the channel today. I watched a little bit of this Luke Thomas video with More Perfect Union, which is a fundraiser. It's called We Investigated the Shady Business Behind the UFC. So they talk about boxing in here, they talk about the UFC and the antitrust lawsuit, and I kind of want to finish this video and give my reaction to some of the points. So I will link this video in the description. Go check it out. Like I said, Luke Thomas and More Perfect Union. Without further ado, let's get right into it.
2026 is going to be the biggest year in UFC history. Coming off of $1.4 billion in revenue, they just launched a 7-year, $7.7 billion deal with Paramount and are planning multiple title fights at the White House on Donald Trump's 80th birthday.
We're going to have a UFC fight on the grounds of the White House.
We're going to take over Washington, D.C. the week of the fight.
This is great news if you're a Trump donor or a tech mogul, but for your average
Why is that only good news for a Trump donor and tech mogul? Why is it a bad thing if the UFC is on the largest stage possible so we can get the most amount of eyeballs to the sport? I don't know. I disagree with that point.
fan, UFC's massive growth hasn't necessarily been so great. Ticket prices to attend fights are through the roof.
This is very facts. I'm not going to pause it 100 times. Let me just get this out the way. I made a video a while ago on Instagram and it went fairly viral, and a lot of actual fighters and other people were liking and commenting on the post. The UFC is pricing out the fans, and it's really unfortunate because the only people that are really affording to go to these events are celebrities or micro celebrities, influencers that don't really care about the sport. And I and many, many other people are massive hardcore fans of the sport. We would love to see it in person. It kind of is almost disrespectful to watch a fight card and nobody gets there until 10:30. You don't watch any of the prelims, and you just see some rich folks in Las Vegas that have nothing better to do on a Saturday and then go to a UFC event.
Do I need generational wealth to go to a UFC event?
Last row in the arena, $500 each.
And a lot of fans feel like the product is just getting worse every year.
This is going to be so bad.
And underneath all of the spectacle, a seismic shift in combat sports is quietly underway. With backing from powerful allies in DC and Saudi Arabia, UFC President Dana White is coming for boxing. He launched Zuffa Boxing last year, and alongside cutthroat mogul Ari Emanuel and WWE executive Nick Khan, they're working to rewrite the laws that govern the sport.
Which is fucking insane, by the way. And I believe it gets into it in this video. I sure hope it does, but this is fucking crazy. I am definitely one to defend Dana White, but this is pretty indefensible.
Ego or arrogance whatsoever when I talk about getting into boxing and trying to fix it, because this is a busted sport.
So, who really is Dana White, the ruthless kingpin of the UFC, and what does he want with boxing?
Talk a little bit more about whether you think it will be a viable competitor to some of the other straight boxing promotions.
I don't want to say we'll be a viable competitor. We're going to blow them all out of the water is what we're going to do.
It's hard to get fighters to speak out, but we talked to a few of them about their experiences working for Dana White. Let's get into it.
Complicated Johnson. I used to watch his videos a lot.
While reaching UFC is the pinnacle for MMA fighters, working for its boss hasn't exactly been a dream. In 2014, a group of former UFC fighters filed a class action antitrust lawsuit alleging the UFC had illegally monopolized the MMA market and suppressed fighter pay. The case dragged on for a decade. The UFC fought it every step of the way. In one testimony, Shane Carwin, a former UFC heavyweight, wrote that CTE has left him bedridden for days at a time, unable to hold down a job despite owning an engineering degree.
That's not the UFC's fault at all. You chose to enter a combat sport where you get punched and kicked in the head. That's going to happen. That's not the UFC's fault.
Finally, in 2024, the UFC agreed to pay $375 million, but admitted no wrongdoing.
They decided to settle the case out of court. So for me, that was a bit of a disappointment in that we didn't actually get to argue it, right? We didn't get to call BS.
So in 2025, a second lawsuit was filed, this time representing fighters from 2017 onward. Dana, meanwhile, can get pretty hostile whenever fighters or journalists bring up these lawsuits.
If you want to be an asshole, let's do it in private.
People have called us monopoly and all this stuff for years. A monopoly? We're just the best.
I love when people who have...
It is a monopoly because you are... No, sorry. It is the best because you are a monopoly. And I have a hot take. The UFC being a monopoly is not a bad thing. That means all of the best athletes will be competing in the UFC. Do we really want to have the sport become where, oh, maybe the best lightweight is in the UFC, but the best welterweight is in PFL, and the best middleweight is in LFA, and the best heavyweight is in Cage Warriors, nobody would like that. Why would you not want all of the best athletes being at the exact same promotion?
No fucking idea what they're talking about and don't know anything about the business, give input.
So is the UFC a monopoly or not? Well, despite what Dana says, his intentions from the beginning were very strategic. The UFC started in 1993 as a promotion to exhibit what are now known as mixed martial arts fights, a sport most Americans had never heard of. Unlike boxing, MMA had no sanctioning bodies overseeing it and very few rules.
It was just so unregulated. My first fight, actually, was I was 185 pounds, and I fought a guy 285 pounds. Total craziness.
Be forewarned, there are no rules, no judges' scores, and no time limits.
I get that there were a lot more meatheads back then, and this was like a new thing. What is the appeal of watching the UFC in 1993 when you have a guy who's 170 pounds fighting a guy who's 320 pounds with no rules?
At one point, the UFC was so brutal, they banned it in 36 states. Jesus. Senator John McCain famously called it human cockfighting and led the charge to get it off of pay-per-view.
People repeatedly getting smashed in the face with a guy sitting on top of them. That's not a sport.
By 2000, the UFC was struggling. Dana White was a boxing manager in Las Vegas and saw an opening. While boxing had strict rules and regulations, we'll get to that later, in MMA, a single promoter could control the rankings, handpick matchups, and sign fighters to exclusive contracts. Dana could build an empire. So in 2001, he connected with his childhood friends, casino moguls Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta.
He approached Lorenzo and said, hey, I know this company that's up for sale. It's actually prize fighting, but there's no sanctioning bodies involved. Athletic commissions are allowing you to put on your own tournament and have your own title. If we can sign enough athletes to an exclusive contract and keep sanctioning bodies out of the game, we can own the sport.
They bought the struggling UFC for $2 million. The new ownership group struggled to find consistent venues for the first UFC event after their acquisition. Most venues rejected these early UFC events. They were deemed too seedy or grotesque.
None of the venues wanted this. You know, they didn't believe in it, they didn't like it, and they were worried about the type of crowd that would show up for this type of event.
But there was one guy in Atlantic City who saw no problem with a fledgling combat sport in a cage.
Does anybody watch UFC, the great Dana White?
So Donald Trump offered to host Dana's first event at his casino.
Dana, congratulations on your first show. That's got to feel good. Basically, what we want to do is we want to make this the Super Bowl of mixed martial arts.
And thus began the quarter-century friendship between Donald Trump and Dana White.
My fellow Americans, it is my honor to introduce the 45th and soon-to-be 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
And then, in a very savvy move,
never been that excited about any fight in the past 12 years?
He turned cage fighting into reality TV.
You either cut the weight in 2 hours or you quit now and become eliminated.
Where he could develop a pipeline for talent and big personalities. For fighters, this was a potentially lucrative opportunity and could help carve a path to stardom.
On this season of The Ultimate Fighter,
I finally got this shot into The Ultimate Fighter. This was my third time auditioning for it, and I was like, okay, that's it. This is my chance.
Cajun Johnson is a former MMA fighter living in British Columbia.
Welcome. This is like Cribs.
He now owns a gym, training the next generation of fighters.
Okay, Moya, Daddy's gonna go to the gym. Okay, come, give me a hug.
I know there's like a 0% chance this happens, but I would love to do a Cajun Johnson interview. I'm a big fan of the guy. I would love to do an interview. I may reach out. We'll see.
After appearing on The Ultimate Fighter,
you ready?
Fight! Cajun was offered a contract with the UFC.
Good, Dad, looking good. I was so happy. Finally, I'm not going to be broke.
Rachel Cajun here at Extreme Couture, Las Vegas. Bunch of heavyweights in the building. You know what it is.
Finally, I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay rent. That was the main thing. It was a huge relief.
But that relief soon turned into an uncomfortable realization about the fine print of the deal. First and foremost, UFC contracts are exclusive, which is a huge difference from the pre-Dana White era.
No one had exclusive contracts to the degree that they do now. I fought in Pride and the UFC at the same time, and many athletes did.
Imagine if in tennis, Wimbledon had exclusive contracts with all of their tennis players. They wouldn't be able to play anywhere but Wimbledon.
Hot take. I think exclusive contracts are completely fine. Maybe there should be more leniency in terms of getting out of the contract and getting out of the UFC, because there's the sunset clause and the 5-year thing, which is pretty wacky. I hope they talk about this in this video. But if you think about it, I really don't see a problem with exclusive contracts, because technically you are okay, this is going to sound really bad. It's going to sound bad, but you own the rights to these fighters. So allowing them to go and compete elsewhere and maybe go into boxing and make $20 million for a fight, they'll obviously never fight in the UFC again, because why would you? So why would that ever incentivize the UFC to allow you to go elsewhere to compete? And again, yes, it would ruin the monopoly of the UFC, which some people think is a good thing. I'm telling you, if this were to go into effect, the UFC and mixed martial arts as a whole would take a nosedive in terms of popularity. Because again, having all of the best athletes be in one league, that is so important. Imagine if the best football players, talking about NFL, imagine if the best NFL players were not in the NFL. They were playing over in Canada in the CFL. They're playing in Arena Football League. You know what I mean? So you got these 25 guys who are phenomenal, and then they're saying, oh, dude, if only he was in the NFL, we could actually see how he would look. It's like the ABA and the NBA, until they eventually merged, which was very important. Like, why would you want to have two leagues where they do the same thing, but you just have different talent? You would want all the best talent in the same league.
Nice work, Alex. Trap that and put it behind his back. After your kick lands, both hands up.
The UFC contract can lock a fighter up for 3 years.
I disagree with that. I believe that should be eradicated somehow, some way.
Sometimes more, even with inactivity. And the rates only modestly increase, sometimes if at all.
You could be out of the UFC before 3 years quite easily. You could also fight for a title in the UFC before the end of that 3-year contract, which if you were not able to renegotiate that contract, then you're going to be fighting at those same rates.
Which kind of makes sense. Like, I agree with Cajun Johnson when he says that. I don't know why, if you're at the point where you're nearing a title shot, why you didn't or why you can't renegotiate a contract. Again, I'm not a manager, so maybe there are some things that I may not understand the ins and outs of. But the more you win, like, you have to be in a very extreme circumstance to fight for the title within 2 or 3 fights. Most of the time, you're at fight number 5, 6, 7, 8, and by that point, you're making more money. Maybe you got a win bonus or 2. You should have restructured your contract, okay? Again, maybe there are some nuances that I'm not picking up on, but that's just my opinion.
Rates are what you get paid to show up and what you get paid to win. And the money isn't nearly as good as people might think.
I was making $8,000 to show, and I was making $8,000 to win.
Which is fine in 1993. That's obviously a big problem in 2005, 2010, 2015, 2020, 2026. That's an issue. I believe the minimum contracts are 12 and 12, which, like I just said, is pretty egregious. I think so fighter pay, I actually have an interesting opinion on fighter pay. I think the minimum contract should be 50 and 50. I don't think these guys should be getting $500,000 in your first UFC fight when you're 7-0 as a professional and you're making $1 million in your next fight. That's fucking crazy. Watch the last UFC event. Watch Strickland versus Hernandez, that card. Watch Wes Schultz versus, who the fuck did he fight? Wes Schultz versus Damian Pinas. You cannot convince me that Wes Schultz deserves more than 50 and 50. If you're going to tell me you think that Wes Schultz deserves 200 and 200, you're out of your mind. There are so many fighters like a Chris Moutinho, like a Junior Tafa, there's a lot of names that do not deserve big paydays because they're piss poor fighters. And that's not even a knock at them, but it's just obvious. If I am not good at my job, I don't deserve to be compensated as such.
People might think that $16,000 is a lot, but I fought once that year, so $16,000 for the year, not super crazy.
And expenses for the fighters come out of their own pockets.
My training costs, that could be a gym membership. My coach, your shin pads, your gloves, your headgear, healthy food, any supplements that you need to use. A lot of the time you have to pay for your blood work because you get tested before you fight.
We're not here just to take
Also manager fees as well. I mean, coaching fees.
Punch! Ready to take over!
If you're Conor McGregor or another top star, sure, you can afford these costs no problem. But for the other 500 plus fighters on the UFC's roster, it can be a different story.
It can get crazy expensive.
So how were these guys even making ends meet?
Fighters were able to get all their own sponsors. If I had a friend that had a company, I could get him to sponsor me and I could put his logo anywhere on my shorts. I could wear whatever shorts I wanted. Most times we would actually make more money on sponsorship than we made on the fight.
The fact, which I assume he's about to say right here, the fact that they took that away is pretty ridiculous, dude. Because you can do sponsorships on social media, you can go on commercials, you can go on television, you can do any kind of promotion, but for some reason you can't do that in the cage on your shorts. I think that's stupid. I think you should be able to have as many advertisements as you need on your shorts.
But in 2015, the UFC signed an exclusive $70 million deal with Reebok and banned all personal sponsorships during fights and promotions.
Reebok has stepped up. These guys are spending a lot of money. We're giving every dime of the money that's coming in to the athletes.
But
is that even true, by the way?
You took 80% of our sponsorship dollars. That's food off our kids' table, food out of our kids' mouths.
And since fighters are classified as independent contractors, they also don't get company benefits.
Peter, Alex, your pads.
That means no comprehensive health insurance, no pension, no collective bargaining rights.
I think that being seen as independent contractors isn't the worst thing, but also if you think about it, you don't have the rights to go do anything else. You are completely confined to the UFC. So actually, mid-sentence, I realized that I completely disagree with what I was about to say. So yeah, I've always been in favor of health insurance, but you shouldn't be seen as an independent contractor if your rights and your freedoms are owned by the UFC and constrained and confined to the UFC.
But they signed the contract with dreams of reaching the top. And if a fighter gets injured or is unable to compete, the UFC can pause their contract, locking them in for even longer. This is exactly what happened to Cajun.
I'm finally into the UFC.
Locking them in for injured or is unable to compete, the UFC can pause their contract, locking them in for even longer.
I've never heard that ever. I've literally never heard one fighter say, oh yeah, I got injured, and then they had to pause my contract and keep me for long. I've never heard anyone say that. Is that true?
This is exactly what happened to Cajun.
I'm finally into the UFC. It's taken like 13 years for me to get here. And then bang, one shot. All of that went down the drain.
In his first UFC fight,
Hands up, Cajun, hands up.
Cajun was knocked out and had his jaw broken in 3 places.
Yeah, my God.
Your jaw is painful?
Yeah. Oh.
Traumatic brain injury is nothing to shake a stick at. For me to get back to training, it was very difficult. So I'm not able to fight. They hit pause on the contract.
And if you're not fighting, you're not getting paid.
What does that mean, though? Is that in terms of the amount, the duration of the contract? Because sometimes it's either 3 fights or, I believe, 5 years is the sunset clause. Because Conor McGregor renegotiated his deal in 2021, and I want to say his sunset clause has already passed in January, I think. Maybe, I could be wrong, but I'm kind of confused what that means. I'm assuming it's the duration of the contract, but I thought contracts are just 3, 4, 5, 6 fights. I didn't know it was 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Contracts don't work like this in any other major sport.
So then that leads to situations where guys know that they're injured but will fight anyway. Dana White's MO is to pay the fighters as little as possible in order to make them willing to fight whoever, whenever, right? Because they're starving, they need to get paid.
Remember when we...
And it's fucked up what he does, but at the end of the day, it does work. Like, for the most part, the best do fight the best. And that's why we love the UFC. So again, you know, if you look at the other extreme side, where boxing, you don't have to fight the best because there is so much that goes into making a boxing match, where you have to have the promoters agree on a deal, on a purse split. Then you have to agree where the fight gets shown, if it's shown on DAZN, if it's on anywhere. You know what I mean? So it's 2 sides. It's 2 extremes, right? We love the UFC because the best have to fight the best. because they kind of have to. But then if you say, oh, that's so fucked up, they need to get paid way more, they shouldn't be independent contractors, then you get boxing. So you need to find a healthy middle ground, which is very hard to achieve.
Said the UFC made $1.4 billion last year. Well, fighters see roughly 17% of that. By comparison, NFL players are guaranteed nearly half of league revenue by their collective bargaining agreement.
I think they should get paid more. I know how fucking dangerous that shit is. You should get paid an incredibly generous amount of money to step into a cage fight for millions of people to see.
So why are fighters afraid to speak out? Well, one reason is that the UFC's monopoly power gives them a lot of power over fighters' careers.
They control the title, they control the rankings, and they have exclusive contracts with every fighter there. If you have exclusive contracts, then you can take away their leverage.
You just got to look at the structure and realize it's designed to screw you and exploit the athlete.
And
you look at fighters like Arman Tsarukyan, Ilia Topuria, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Those are guys that are not bound by anything, and technically they have all the leverage because they are so wealthy. And Conor McGregor, they are so wealthy, they don't need to fight. So if let's say I'm Ilia Topuria and I really want to fight Islam Makhachev, I really want to be a triple champion, but they're saying, oh, you know what, here's $1.5 million. I can say, you know what, dude, like, I'm worth much more, and I'm already very wealthy. Why do I even need to accept that? What's the point? Same with Arman Tsarukyan. His father, of course, is ridiculously wealthy. If I'm Arman Tsarukyan and the UFC continues to shit-can me and say, oh, you know what, nope, you're not getting a title shot, you got to fight this guy, oh, I'm not happy with Arman Tsarukyan, I'm not happy with you, you could get back to the line. Why even try to get a title shot? I know that that is your dream and your passion and your goal, but you're not bound by anything. You have so much money, you don't even need that.
Same power structure that exploits fighters, it's hurting the fan experience too. For one, ticket prices to UFC events have risen by 4,000% over the last 2 decades. Of course, some of this has to do with the massive rise in popularity for the sport, but it helps that there are no rival leagues competing for the MMA marketplace.
If there was many competing organizations, like, the PFL and Bellator and Cage Warriors, and if I find it hard to believe that if those were competing organizations, that ticket prices would just completely drop as a result, and everybody could, no, that's not how it would work. Come on.
Over the past 25 years, the UFC has...
Maybe this is a stupid analogy, but there's 1,000 gas stations all within a 1 mile radius of each other. It's not like because of that, gas will just go down $2 a gallon. That's not how that works. And I know that may be a weird analogy, but...
Squashed or acquired nearly all other promoters that could employ their fighters.
The events keep breaking records. There must be a cap at one point. Do you think you may be reaching a point to outprice the fans?
We're not close. I mean, we keep breaking the record.
It's also hurting fans by watering down the sport's quality. This happens when elite athletes turn down MMA entirely because the money isn't worth it. Heavyweight champ Francis Ngannou walked away from the UFC rather than fight under their terms. He had requested better health insurance, the ability for all UFC fighters to have sponsorships, and a fighter advocate present during all contract negotiations.
You know how restrictive the UFC contract can be for independent contractor. There is not really a lot of things that you can do when you are in that contract.
And what was...
I think the fighter, either ex-fighter or current fighter, being present for all negotiations, I think that's a really cool idea. I'm going to be honest. I've never heard anyone even think of that. That's pretty fucking genius.
Dana's response to the former heavyweight champion?
So he's full of shit there. Believe me, I have no sleepless nights.
But also, again, I've already made videos talking about Francis Ngannou with his other egregious demands. We don't even know if that's actually what he campaigned for. You can kind of just use that as a scapegoat or a Trojan horse to make it seem like he was just a freedom fighter and he was doing everything in his power to fight for the fighters. But then when he gets to the PFL and he fights for the fighters, we all saw what happened with that. So take that with a grain of salt.
It's over Francis leaving.
The bottom line is all of this results in both fighters and fans getting a worse product out of UFC in recent years. In fact, this is exactly what happened to boxing. In its early days, boxing operated under a much less strict regulatory environment. Promoters controlled everything at the expense of fighters and fans. Then, in 1998, heavyweight champion Mike Tyson fired and sued his infamous promoter Don King for diverting millions of his earnings.
I'm getting ready to go see $40 million, and I'm broke. I don't have a penny. It percolates. Don is dissing me.
In 2000, the system changed.
The act represents a long overdue effort to improve boxers' safety, reduce conflict of interest, discourage coercive contracts, and create a uniform set of standards and procedures.
The Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act passed with unanimous bipartisan support. Here's what the Ali Act did. Number one, it required promoters to disclose financial details of contracts to fighters. Number two, it prohibited conflicts of interest, so promoters can't also be managers. Number three, it banned coercive multi-fight contracts that locked fighters up for years. And number four, it forbid promoters from having their own rankings and titles.
Couple issues with the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act, but if I had the choice to remove it, I would never remove it. I would absolutely keep it in place, because every single law and act will have its cons. But yeah, the fact that Dana White is trying to remove this is fucking ridiculous, dude.
In short, the Ali Act gave boxers freedom from promoter control over their entire careers. Plus, boxing has multiple sanctioning bodies that recognize champions. They don't have to fight under one organization.
Which ruined the sport, by the way, but
it is a more competitive marketplace. Fighters.
It really just, it's all about what you value more. If you're a fan and you want to see the absolute best product and the best fight the best all of the time, then the UFC plan works better. If you want to see the fighters just be doing it for their own sake and making as much money as they can while minimizing their risk and also at the same time not getting the best fights all the time, then the boxing plan works way better for you.
Have their pickup promoters, and promoters organize fights, negotiate TV deals, and market their fighters. The result is that boxers have at least some protections against being exploited like underpaid gig workers.
You think boxers at the championship level worry about health insurance, or anyone in their family worries about health insurance? No. Nobody.
This is going to be like this is the bread and butter of your striking. So I'm going cross, hook.
If fighters are able to move back and forth in between organizations, if I'm able to create a bidding war, which is how boxers make so much money, right? Create a bidding war between 6 different promoters and then take the highest offer, it would lead to a situation where the fighter has the power, has the leverage.
Which is true, but then again, you'll just get boxing where the best don't fight the best. It's pretty rare to have the best fighting the best in boxing. It's kind of changed as of recent with the Saudi takeover because Turki Al-Sheikh has all of the money to blow, so he can make these fights happen. But before that, boxing was completely on a downward spiral, and it was very close to being a dead sport completely because you would never see super fights. And when you would see a super fight, it would be 3 to 6 years after it should have happened. Of course, Floyd versus Pacquiao should have happened 9 years before it did. Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence should have happened 4 or 5 years before it did. There are countless boxing matches that should have happened way sooner or should have happened in general that didn't happen because of this. And again, it all goes into what you value more. Do you value a better product and the best fighting the best? Or do you value fighters being in control of everything and being financially comfortable?
But the laws passed by Congress to protect the rights and interests of boxers do not now and never have applied to MMA.
I've been trying to tell you guys, these TKO guys are scumbags. And now they're
so fucking rich coming from Oscar De La Hoya, by the way.
They're trying to change the Muhammad Ali Act to fuck boxers over. Get the fuck out of our sport.
Well, last year, White and TKO launched Zuffa Boxing. He's got powerful partners. Saudi Arabia's Turki Al-Sheikh, the architect behind the kingdom's massive sports investments.
We have just done a deal to start a new boxing league with Turkey. The model is proven to deliver the fights that the fans want to see.
But with the original Ali Act in place, he can't run boxing the way he runs UFC. So he's backing legislation to change that.
So fucking insane, by the way.
Republican Congressman Brian Jack and Democratic Congresswoman Sharice Davids introduced the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, a bill designed to revive American boxing.
Let's join together in a spirit of bipartisanship and revive one of America's greatest sports
and the name of one of America's greatest athletes, Muhammad Ali.
On the surface, it sounds good. Guaranteed minimum pay, improved health coverage, enhanced safety protections, and it still borrows the name from the boxing legend. But inside the bill?
This Revival Act has some window dressing and a bit of a Trojan horse.
Buried in the legislation is something else. The creation of unified boxing organizations. They'd have their own rankings and their own championship belts. And crucially, they could sign fighters to exclusive, long-term, coercive contracts.
If you give me control of the entire industry, if you give me the ability to monopolize the entire industry, then boxing will be better. This is what they're putting forth.
I'm going to build the thing from the ground up, just like we did the UFC. No sanctioning organizations, and we will have our own belts, just like the UFC.
Simply stated,
Dana White and Zuffa Boxing is that the only thing you ever hear him say is, we're going to take over boxing, we're going to say boxing. That's it. There's nothing, there's no plans, there's no detailed explanations of anything. It's just him coming in and saying, I'm going to take over the sport because it's dying, and I'll make it way better.
Dana is repackaging the UFC model for boxing. This isn't just about the UFC. It's about what happens when you let one company control an entire industry. It's the same story for Amazon warehouse employees, Starbucks baristas, and yes, UFC fighters. When greed aligns with political power, the workers, in this case the fighters who assume all of the physical risk, and the consumers, all of the passionate fans paying thousands for tickets, they end up on the losing side of things.
Great. Very, very well put together, very well explained. Go to Luke Thomas's channel, drop a like, drop a subscribe, drop a comment on this video. Also check out the More Perfect Union fundraiser. You could donate right here. It's also linked right with the video. I'm going to leave a link to this video in the description. If you have any thoughts, then leave them in the comments. And thank you very much for watching. And follow me on Instagram and TikTok at VinceMMA1. Go to 3punchconvo.com. Use my code VinceMMA for your first free month. And again, thank you very much for watching.